Geek Girl Online welcomes back Black Girls Create. Della Gallegos moderates this panel on redemption arcs in media. She is in a light blue room with colorful art prints on the wall behind her. Connie has pink dreads and big black headphones. Bayana is showing her love for Black Girls Create with her purple braids and bright yellow t-shirt. And Robin has on a black shirt and is sitting in front of a tall bookshelf. Take it away, Black Girls Create.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for Geek Girl Online. Let's talk about redemption. For those who don't know us, we're all members of Black Girls Create. Yeah, give it props. It's very different to be recording a panel. We're very used to doing these panels in person. Maybe you've caught us at other events in the past where we be talking about critical fandom and creating stories therefrom. So we can go around and introduce ourselves. I'll be moderating. I'm Della Gallegos, the marketing director for Black Girls Create. You can just go around the room.
I'm Connie, managing editor for Black Girls Create.
I'm Bayana. I am co-founder and editor-in-chief of Black Girls Create.
And I'm Robin. I'm also co-founder and chief community officer for Black Girls Create.
We be doing stuff. You should check us out.
We do be doing stuff.
Yeah. And when the Rona is not doing stuff, we're doing even more, usually.
I mean, I feel like we've made up for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's about the same.
Yeah, actually, probably. Which means next year will be double because we'll keep doing this stuff and be back in person, hopefully.
Calm down. Hush.
I mean, I already know what it is. We know the game. So actually, everybody who's here knows you guys were all excited like we were to go to Geek Girl Con, but we can't. So it's Geek Girl Conline. So this panel actually is something that we have been talking about just within our community and our spaces for a while, just about redemption arcs and everything. And since then, Avatar has come back into the zeitgeist and stuff. So we really wanted to talk about, especially from the perspective as creators who come at creation from a place of fandom, about what makes an actually good redemption arc and the problems in discussing redemption arcs within fandom and how it can get kind of muddled. So I wanted to start with what is it about redemption arcs that makes them so satisfying as an audience / makes us want to see them where they don't actually exist? Anyone can take it.
I don't really know the answer to the last question because I personally am if it's not a redemption arc, it's not. If it's done poorly, and if I'm I see what y'all trying to do and you didn't do it, then that makes me mad more than oh, now it's time to go be excited. And I'm very much just nah, didn't do it. If it did do it though, I think it's really exciting. I think in part because it's a really clear character arc and story. All characters go through an arc or should. But I think it's it can be satisfying if it's someone who you're, who you might not be rooting for at first. And then you slowly are oh, wait, no, they have, there's something about them and you're seeing how they're kind of learning and growing and being able to see that come to fruition can be really exciting.
Yeah, I think from the fandom point of view too, it's we always want to put ourselves in stories, and there's always this fear in life about doing something just irredeemable or that you can't take back. And so a redemption arc is always oh, there's nothing that you cannot be redeemed from. There should be, or there might be nothing. And then also seeing it, it's we always want to believe the best in people. I think it's very difficult in real life, and people in fandom. We're coming up against this in my first fandom right now, unfortunately, where you're just oh, there's nothing good here. And I think that's a very uncomfortable thing to sit in. And so you always, as just humans, want to give the benefit of the doubt. I think most humans, I should say, want to give the benefit of the doubt and want to believe that just because someone does a bad thing doesn't make them a bad person. And so seeing a redemption arc that is done well helps to reinforce that, like, there are bad deeds, but there are not bad people. And that, you know, given the right circumstances, given the right motivations, like, anyone can become better and do better.
I think another aspect of it is just character development. We love to see characters grow on screen, and a redemption arc is like one of the most, like, I guess longest, but it's one of the most full, like, actual arcs that you can see. Like, the most obvious sign of a character's growth. Like, you know, you can have a character start good and then become better. And then a lot of times characters are good and then become more complex or become bad or morally gray. But it's just like getting to see a character start bad and then become good is just like one of the most obvious. And it's just also like the long journey that you can have. And I've already forgotten which of you said it, but it's like often a surprise too, where it's just like, oh, you just suddenly have this like new feeling about a character. Like, do I like you now? You were a jerk. Like, what is this feeling? Like, why, what? And so it's just like the long journey and like getting to discover a character and you know, peeling that onion or whatever the quote is from Shrek. So
onions have
Onion.
I think also for me,
Shrek gotta add it to the list, man. It's kind of
he's
a jerk.
In a way.
And then he's like, nice.
Yeah.
He has
must be
reasons
left
for being a
alone.
jerk. Yeah.
Sure.
He's dealing with colonialism and gentrification and like, you know,
I think a lot
he should
of the
have
good
some grace.
redemption arcs they do have reasons, and we can probably, you know, we'll talk about that later. But
yeah. Sometimes they have good
I was
reasons.
just like, wait, a new one. Shrek.
Yeah.
Check us out, Geek Girl Con 2021, where we dissect Shrek and his motivations. I think also for me, like, when it's a good redemption arc, the thing is, redemption arcs, when they're good, and that's why we're going to talk about the difference between what makes them good and what makes them not so good. When they're done well is also a sign of just good craft in general. So if a good redemption arc exists within the story is also in and of itself probably really compelling, even outside of that one arc, because it takes like a lot of talent to do that, I feel. So what are the key facets of a successful redemption arc in your opinion, and what are some examples that you like?
Well,
Biana wants to start with a banger. I can tell. You could just
I don't know about all that.
It's like we gotta start with the facets, and then we can like spend 35 minutes on examples.
Yeah. I think in terms of facets, it's like the character has to know what they've done wrong, and has to want to make amends and like atone for those things, and it has to be conscious, you know what I mean? Like, you can't just be like
stumble into it.
You can't stumble into it. You can't, and I think the reason is important too. It can't be like, I am gonna do good things because of something that will serve me specifically. It has to be, I'm doing this to atone for what I've done. I'm doing this because I know what I did was wrong, so now I want to apologize, you know, take actions to fix the wrongs that have been done. And then like, whether or not people forgive you is not really up to you. And I think you have to also have an acceptance that you're going through this, but that doesn't mean that everyone's going to accept you. It can't just be, I'm doing this so that people will like me. Like, that's not the move. But yeah, like more specifically, there have to be steps taken to atone, and it can't just be for yourself, I guess.
I think there also needs to be, for me, I think a facet that makes it successful. There needs to be stumbles too. Like, it's not like you don't just wake up and get it right. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I did something, I want to, you know, change my behavior. Like, it has to be believable in terms of I'm unlearning behaviors, or I'm figuring out like what I actually did wrong. Because I think that a lot of times, like, good characterization should be, even with villains, like, they think that they're right when they're doing the thing, right? So when the villain or the person that needs to be redeemed does harm, in that moment, they should think that that harm is justified or correct, and they're not just like out, you know, doing evil to do evil, because that's flat and hollow and sociopathic, I guess, or psychopathic. I don't know. So on the flip side of that, when they recognize that, oh, I did do harm and I want to do better, I want to change, it can't just be like, I want to change, and then all of a sudden they're perfect and they don't make any stumbles, and they because then it's like, well, then you knew what you were doing the whole time. Like you could have just been doing right.
Yeah, I was just gonna put a finer point on what Bayana was saying earlier. Like, it has to be internal. I think there's a lot of cause, like, obviously story has to happen around a character. It can't all be just like in the character's head. So like there usually is an external impetus for this character making a change, but I think the harder work has to be internal. And so as much as I love a romance, it can't be the girl wants me to be better. Like, you have to want it. Sure, the girl could be a piece of that, but there have to be multiple factors, or else why is the audience going to believe that this is going to stick? Because both in real life and in story, especially if it's long form story, especially on a TV show, if it's because of a romance, writers love to undo that real quick. So I think it has to be rooted in more than just one thing, because you can always undo that one thing, and then the audience has to believe why the character wouldn't just revert back to who they were. And sometimes they do. That's part of what Robin was saying earlier with the stumbling. It's like sometimes it was rooted in just the love of a girl or the love of a man. Okay. And then that love or that character or that relationship breaks. And so the character reverts back to who they were before, because it wasn't a strong enough redemption arc. And so, you know, even if that character eventually goes back to on this path, this journey for good, it just means that there have to be other pieces to the puzzle of why they've made this big change in their life, both from a why are you making this change? Like, it has to be big enough, but also just from a satisfactory narrative perspective from the viewer or the reader, because it's just like, I have to believe that this character who I believed was bad or learns new pieces about, and now I'm like, well, you have the potential to do good, but I have to believe why they actually made those decisions.
Yeah, I agree. I also think a piece of it for me personally is that, like, the actions that they take, because I forget who, but we mentioned atonement, but like adequately atones for the thing, right? Like, it's not like, you know, I was a genocidal maniac, but, you know, I kissed this girl this one time and wanted her to go and finish the job as I died. You know, like, it's got to be comparable. Like, it has to be a journey of like actually atoning for the thing.
That was so pointed.
y'all watching this might be figuring out who is on our list. And we're not really hiding it very well.
It really pointed for someone who did not watch it. Like,
I did not watch it. I did not. I'm not gonna lie to you all. But so
that's why it shocked me, because I was like, oh, okay.
Well, because like you already had there were other pointed remarks about other ones, so, you know, we're just gonna run the gamut. But for now, what are examples of ones that stories, or it can be, you know, books, movies, TV shows, whatever, that do the thing well?
Okay, well, we have to start out. Yeah, we have to. Well, I mean, we just have to start here.
Zuko.
There's no reason not
over
to.
here going around. Zuko.
I'm not trying to go around. That's what I'm trying to say.
No, I said y'all going back and forth. Y'all are going back and forth. Who's gonna do it? Just
Bayana said, I'll do it. I'll do it. It's
Zuko. Okay, Fire Lord. Fire Lord Zuko. Okay, let's talk about with the ponytail.
So I just got to Avatar Land this year. And so it's one of the things that people say the most. Like, Zuko's redemption arc is the best in like all of television history. And I've watched quite a bit of television, and it's been like 15 years since the show came on. And so it's like, okay, but like, it's 15 years later, like, y'all are remembering that it was a really good redemption arc. And then I'm like, oh wait, I love him now. That's my precious bean. And so I'm just like, it is both because I love this character, but also just narratively, the way that they structure his redemption arc is the pinnacle for me in terms of what we mentioned earlier. He acknowledges the mistake. There are stumbling moments. It is not because of, you know, one singular external factor. He literally has like the fever sweats on trying to decide, like, am I actually going to go down this good path? There's a physical change that makes him better as well. The, you know, shaggy hair Zuko is bae. And so I think it, for me, it definitely is, especially in the last 15 years of television. I haven't seen too many stories that successfully did it as well, especially as succinctly as it is done on Avatar: The Last Airbender.
I also think to credit the creators of Avatar, they're very unambiguous about it. Like whenever I think about Zuko and his redemption arc, I think about when he goes to meet them at the air temple. They have their little and send him away, and he has that entire conversation with himself on screen. Like it's like an internal thing.
Why am I so bad at being good?
Why am I so bad at being good? Why would I expect them to forgive me? If I want them to forgive me, does that mean that my motivation, like he says it.
And
he says
doesn't
it plain.
expect them to, like he wants them to, but like when they say no, it's not like, how dare you? You should accept that I'm doing that. Yeah,
it is, and then he corrects himself.
He corrects himself, exactly.
They should. I'm trying, and then he's like, well, what do they care? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
He has all of those emotions, and I think that like that's what makes it so great too, is because like you see in that one little like monologue scene what like every other like poor redemption arc like does like one bit of that and doesn't go all the way over.
They never go all the way, and it's never as
all the way.
explicit.
It's never as explicit, but it's also like, oh, they should see I'm trying, and they don't accept me, and then that reverts everything. Like a writer creator will say, oh, the gang didn't accept their redemption overture, so he goes back. You know what I mean? Like you see all the time in like different formats in which ways that like redeemable characters go halfway there and don't go fully there. And not only does Zuko go fully there, but he like talks to you about it. Like he like says it out. He narrates his whole process. And I think that that's like amazing.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like he's the only one I can really think of in terms of like a good, in terms of like, given like the things that I've, give it like in terms of like the stuff that I've seen, not to say that there isn't another one. I think also in part, like sometimes the other thing is like one of the really easy ways out that people do redemption arcs is just have that person die. Like, oh no, they jumped in front of the thing and now they're dead. And so that was their final act. One? Their final act is the redemption. Is the redemption as opposed to like an actual arc. And
that doesn't make it an arc, you guys.
It doesn't make it an arc. It just makes it a moment that they decided, oh shit, like I want to do something right.
You want to call it a redemption arc, not the redemption moment.
Yeah. And that's not to say that the moment's not good or useful to story or like, but like
it's just to say that it's not a redemption.
It's not the character is not redeemed.
No, because they haven't atoned for all of the things that they've done, and like the idea that like death can like wipe all that away is kind of weird and like no.
So
but I think. This one isn't really a redemption arc, I don't think. I think it is in terms of like the character is redeemed in the eyes of everyone else, but they were always doing what they were doing the whole time. You know what I mean? Delia knows what I'm talking about. So Itachi Uchiha in Naruto, I don't know that it's a redemption arc only because he was. Spoilers if you haven't.
Yeah, maybe spoilers in general.
I'm gonna need some context here.
Yeah, but so
like who is this character?
Yeah, so Itachi is a character who, when introduced, his brother Sasuke is like, there's like my main goal is I'm trying to kill my brother because his brother killed their entire like family clan and then dipped. Right, so they're done. It's over, canceled. Uchiha gone. So so this whole time Sasuke is growing up like thinking like my brother killed like all of our people and everyone else thinks that Itachi is this like rogue ninja and he's like evil and all he wants is power, whoop-de-whoop. And so at a certain point, we find out that really he was doing all of that to keep the entire village safe, because the Uchiha were going to try to spark a civil war, which would have messed up everything. And to keep Sasuke safe, specifically. He was like, I'll do this. He was told by the village elders to do this thing. And he was like, I will do it if you keep my brother safe. And then he was like, and I'll go into this like criminal organization, spy on them for y'all. So that he's safe, so that the village is safe. So his whole arc is about him working for the village. But no one knows that because everybody thinks he's
undercover,
murking everybody, right? And so it's not so much a redemption in that, like, yeah, he did all these bad things, but it wasn't like he kind of stayed the same. But I think that like especially in Sasuke's eyes, and even in like Naruto and like a few of the others, when they find out, like it redeems him in their eyes. And it's kind of cool to see how they're all like, nah, this like evil dude, he got to get killed. Like he got to be done. Right. To then later, once they find out, being like, oh, what's up? Like, that's my bro. Like, that's like, what's good, fam? Like, so I don't know exactly like where specifically that fits, but I feel like it has like, it's some kind of like, it's like a different kind of redemption, I guess.
I think it's a redemption. It sounds like it's a redemption in the story, because I'm assuming that the viewer thinks that he's evil the whole time too, and then so it is a redemption arc. It's just that he personally
himself doesn't change.
Yeah, but his reputation got redeemed.
And I think also he, in his story specifically, and we don't have to get into the weeds, he gets redeemed as a brother, because in spite of doing all this for a good purpose, it's still the impact is still incredibly negative on Sasuke and where he goes. And then by the end of that, by the end of that arc, it's a lot of feelings, but like that relationship, I mean, why am I trying not to spoil it? Basically, Sasuke goes to a very dark place, and it because of Itachi's actions, and Itachi does the work and accepts the fault in order to pull Sasuke back from that darkness. Well, as far as he can.
Yeah.
I was thinking of, and this is going to be weird, but I think it fits. And it's basically everyone in the Good Place. Because
yes, I was like, this is reminding me of something, and I can't put my finger on it. And it's probably just The Good Place, because we had Eleanor on our list, but like everyone else also counts in the way that they're saying of like their characters are the same.
Jason. I still quibble with Jason because I just don't think that he's smart enough to be redeemed. I don't think he knew that he needed to be redeemed, and I don't think he understands. I think if you said the word redemption, he'd ask for a side of ketchup. Like, I just don't think that Jason has the range to be redeemed, but I love him anyway.
Can we change, sorry, just like motion to change the name of this title to Redemption with a side of ketchup?
And the ketchup is blood.
Jason is my precious bean, but like he doesn't know. I think that like, so Eleanor is like the main person who we follow through The Good Place. Even though every other, like, don't they have a name?
The Soul Squad.
The Soul Squad.
Team Cockroach. They came up with a few names.
They have a few names. But I was trying to think of like the names. The Soul Squad works. Eleanor's the main one that we follow. And we get like the whole first part of the first season is like her redemption specifically, because she's the only one that we know for a fact is not where she's supposed to be. But the thing I love too about The Good Place is that the way in which they set up this universe is that like literally this show spans Jeremy Bearimy, like 1 billion something years, like however many redemption, like, or resets, reboots, returning them back into different points in their life at like, and changing things. And each time they are trying to do the work and being redeemed. Like when we first meet Eleanor for the first, like, I would say season, like her redemption is just that, like, she's like, I'm not that bad. I should go to a medium place. I shouldn't be in the bad place. Like,
I'm a medium person.
I'm a medium person.
Like
And
Cincinnati.
yeah, she should just be stuck in Cincinnati. But then she starts to see, like, I mean, it changes, her motivations change from I should be in the medium place to like, no one should be in the bad place. Like, the bad place is like not a fair thing. And like kind of her mission and the whole mission of the Soul Squad then becomes to like redeem humanity. And at different points, you'll see them actually sacrifice. Like, I think at one, I can't remember if it's like the second season or not, but like Eleanor is ready to just like, if it saves everyone else, like she'll go to the bad place. And you see that in like a lot of different points, but it's also a really good redemption story because there's all of these times in which they have to realize and they're finding out where they've gone wrong. Chidi Adeganye spends his entire life thinking that like he's a
professor of
moral ethics. Like, he spends his entire life being like
redemption and like talking about
and like I mean I really like almond milk, but I know it's the almond milk, right? So like he believes at a certain point that he is in the bad place because he had almond milk that one time, right? But he spends his entire life like really thinking hard about like the choices he makes and the impact of the ethical impact of those choices. But because it's so difficult for him to like, he's so indecisive and he's so like
caught up in the choice,
caught up in ethical dilemmas, he makes everyone around him miserable. And that's the problem, right? Like, sometimes, like, even if you make a bad choice, you make that choice and you own it and then you move on. But like, he's stuck. So I think that like, that's the other part that makes it a really great like redemption story, is because you have that moment of reckoning. Like, you know, we talk about Zuko as the blueprint, and Zuko sitting there like getting fever sweats and like figuring out like all like understanding and recognizing and reckoning with all the ways in which he's done wrong. Like, every single member of the Soul Squad does that 15 to 16 times. Like,
yeah.
And each time it takes them a varying degree of length, but each time eventually they start their path to redemption.
And I guess part of it too, part of the journey is the forward action. So it's just like, you have to realize and you have to atone, which can mean, I guess, a varying amount of things, but like apology and like dealing with the people that you have specifically wronged. But a lot of these examples, they go that step further in like helping other people who aren't even involved in the scenario, which is like, oh, you're actually like putting it forward and paying it forward and helping more people than just the ones that you hurt. Because I think that's also a limiting aspect of a lot of redemption stories. It's like, I mean, you can help these 4 people, but what about everybody else?
Yeah. I mean, they even get a demon to be redeemed.
Right.
So, you know, like, he starts off the show just like being like, butthole spiders are boring and cliche. And then he ends up being like, let's save humanity, man. I love humans. I'm going to retire on Earth. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think The Good Place is a great example of that, and you guys should just watch it too because it's funny as hell.
And makes you emotional and happy and warm. Yeah. One of the examples I was thinking of is an anime example again. So on Dragon Ball Z, which like yes, that makes sense.
I literally would not have guessed this at all, and I don't actually know who you're talking about. I'm assuming. But yeah,
it's fine. But it is like one of the most famous, especially in the anime world, of Vegeta.
Yeah.
I mean, Piccolo counts too, because like a lot of the people on Dragon Ball Z started as villains and then became good guys because the power of like happy-go-lucky Goku, I guess. Mm-hmm. But I think with Vegeta, it's the strongest because he literally hates Goku, probably until even during his redemption. It's like he's good now, but he still hates Goku. But I think one of the most obvious ways in which that manifests is just the comparison between Goku and Vegeta. So Goku's like happy and go lucky, but he's the savior of the earth many times over and like all of the galaxy or whatever, because he's the strongest, but also like has the purest heart, blah, blah, blah. Vegeta, meanwhile, is like the tortured prince of a lost world that was, destroyed and colonized, and then he was forced to work for the person who colonized his planet, and so he was a murderer for all these planets and stuff. And so he comes to Earth and he meets the crew and they fight, and like people kill each other. Like he's definitely killed some of the main squad on Dragon Ball Z, and they just like got magicked back to life. But he definitely murked a few of them, and then like they have to work together for a common cause, because like it's like, oh well, you're stuck here too, so if you don't help us beat these dudes, then you gonna die as well. And it's like, fine, whatever, I guess I'll be here to help you guys, but it's only because I want to win and I want to beat these guys. Like after that, I'm done, I'm not staying here, whatever. And then, you know, it's I guess part of it, like the impetus is kind of a girl, I guess. Like they skip 3 years and it's like suddenly he has a son with the main girl character. But like he doesn't really express like for her either. And so it's just like, it's not because he fell in love, because he did not really. They had some sort of
baby mama.
Literally a baby mama. And but the way in which it's most strongly expressed is the way that like Goku, who's like this paragon of good, is the worst dad in all of anime.
That's a whole panel on its own.
Bad as a dad. Like he is not a good father. He's just always gone. Like
people talk about Aang in post Avatar, but like y'all,
Goku chose to stay dead rather than be there with his children, because he was like, but they're doing some like immortal battles over there. I want to fight. I just like want to fight. It seems really fun. Sir, you're dead. You're abandoning your family. I mean, not that he really could give them any support or money. He's not very smart, etc. But he was like, well, I'm just going to stay dead. Like, I know you tried to get me back, and like you went and searched for the Dragon Balls to get me back, but I'm just going to stay. Meanwhile, Vegeta, who does not like anybody, is like, oh, I'm going to train my son. And like, it's still a long journey for him to become this better person. But by the end of the series, it's like he's learning how to sacrifice himself for the good of the planet that he nearly once destroyed. He came to Earth like, I'm about to murk the entire planet with one little blast from my finger. And now he's like sacrificing himself, and he's a good dad, and he like actually stays there for his family and like marries his baby mama, and like they have more children, and he learns how to smile and all this stuff. And it's just like, Goku, how are you getting beat out by your mortal enemy? I just don't understand. Sir. Yeah. Like Vegeta, when you first meet Vegeta, there's no way you're like, he's going to win Best Dad Award. And yet, he does. And yet. So I think that's a really good one, because there are times when he, like, especially towards the end of the series, like, yeah, I sucked and I like did all these bad things, but because I've like come to love people here, I realized that I should help them. And I think it doesn't quite, I think it is like a lot of the impetus is other people, and it's not as many a varied reason, but I think it is still on the scale, like higher than certain other redemption arcs.
So when looking at works of storytelling, what do you think people often get wrong with redemption arcs, especially in fandom discourse? Oh, the discourse.
Oh, the discourse. I would say one of the things is, you know, what we talked about with like people adding the redemption on themselves, and confusing like fanon and headcanons with like what actually happens, and like we see that
it cannot be implied, you guys.
Yeah, if it's implied redemption, it's not a redemption. I'm thinking about, because I just want to talk about Star Trek. In Star Trek Discovery, it kind of goes with what Bayana was saying about Naruto. Michael Burnham doesn't have a redemption arc the first season, and she gets thrown in the brig and called a mutineer, and she be like literally like is like the impetus for starting the Klingon War. And then at the end of the season, she stops the war, brings about peace. But because it's bad communication, really, is what it is, and people don't want to listen to her. She does make some questionable choices, and she could have done things better, and she was impulsive and like didn't get buy-in to the decision that she made. Because she was everyone was kind of acting out of fear. And she acted out of fear more than others. But morally, she doesn't change her stance at all. Like, she did what she thought was right. And given the chance of going back in time, which they can do, watch Star Trek, y'all. If she went back in time, she would probably do the same thing. She might communicate better and like actually get buy-in before she made the choice that she makes. But like, she doesn't actually need to be redeemed. It's just one of those like unfortunate circumstances. So when I hear people talk about it as like a redemption, and like, you know, she starts the season off as like the mutineer and getting stripped of her rank and stuff, and then ends the season getting like commendations and medals, that's just like an unfortunate circumstance, or just the circumstances that have to happen, and that's part of her journey. But it's not a redemption. It has nothing really, it doesn't really say much about her as a person, and her morality and her moral compass, because she did an action that she thought was right and would do it again, and wouldn't change those things. And doesn't, I mean, she caused harm because she started a war, but that war was going to happen. It was how, you know, it's just perception. And I think that's like something that in fandom discourse a lot too, people confuse like how the other characters perceive an action, or how the world of the story perceives an action versus like what actually does happen. And that matters, and that plays a lot of role, because to me, a redemption arc has to be very internal. And if she internally doesn't think that she did anything wrong, or she needs to be redeemed for anything, then it's not a redemption arc.
Yeah. I think for me, going off of what Robin said about folks like doing more in the fandom than in actual canon, and then kind of like muddling the two. I think like Draco Malfoy is a really good example of that, where there are moments where he could begin a redemption arc. And honestly, I think it would make him and the story much more interesting if that did happen, but it doesn't. And so it becomes a thing where like, I'm sure there's some fic that does the work, and it's good, and like can like fully, you know, brings in all of the different things that are going on with him. But the text itself lays out all these things, and he has moments, I think, before even like him being on the astronomy tower with Dumbledore, where he could have maybe like at least started a little bit, right? But
Agreed.
That moment in particular, to me, should have been or could have been the moment where he like begins his arc. And the moment where he at Malfoy Manor, where he like doesn't really say if it's Harry or not, could have been like the moment where it was like, oh snap, like he's really like making this choice. But when he goes after Harry, Ron and Hermione at the Room of Requirement during the Battle of Hogwarts, that kind of negates all of that. So we have all this this whole thing where you're like, oh wait, is Draco about to? Oh nope, just kidding.
No. He doesn't do the work, like
not even a little bit, and he doesn't even.
Draco got a Draco.
And even after Harry saves him, then he immediately goes back to the Death Eaters, like, "Nah, we're on your side." So he does not ever really like push himself to take the proper steps to redeem himself, and I think that is.
I think that's fine.
That is, I think that's fine for the story, but it's not.
But not for the perception that a lot of audience members have about. Well,
I mean, I think that, and also just like, even if we want to talk about like the epilogue and Cursed Child, like we don't, but I think that those both make it seem more like there was something there, or at the very least, Harry and Draco like got over their differences, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Draco. It has to happen on screen, but it also doesn't mean that Draco got over his like anti-Muggle-born like prejudice.
Just because he gets along with Harry doesn't mean he's not still racist.
Right. So that's the thing. It's like that, and that is really the what the redemption is.
Yes.
The redemption is about him not liking Harry. He and Harry could never be friends, and Draco could still be redeemed.
Absolutely. And that's a huge part that people miss.
Right. And so
I mean, it's not about the personal relationship between the characters. It's about whether or not they are actually good or not. Like Zuko and the team, they could have, again, hated his guts for the rest of the series. And, you know, they participate in the war at the same time, whatever. Everything turns out the way that it did, but they don't like him. he's still redeemed because he did the thing. Just because Aang or Katara or whoever does not forgive him for that, then it doesn't, it's still, he still had a redemption arc.
Right. And whereas like Draco, it's very much like he just doesn't get there. And he could.
Also, same with Dudley. It's just like all of a sudden they're like shaking hands and it's like, okay, but like there's no like on-screen work for this change, and it doesn't tell me that you've actually changed as a person. It just means you've changed your opinion about this one person.
This one person. I think that's something that Harry Potter, as a fandom and as a series, like just what the author wrote, does poorly throughout the story is it, and we talked about this on our podcast, Wizard Team plug, is that there is a larger conflict going on. And like Harry is at the middle, is at the center of the conflict, but the conflict is not about Harry. It is about like who deserves to live, who's like, is magic might, do Muggleborns or do Muggles in general deserve the same rights and protections and like freedoms as wizarding kind. That is the battle that's happening. Harry happens to be in the center of that battle, but your relationship to Harry does not decide whether or not you are good or evil. And I think that the author muddles it, and I think that a lot of the post-canon stuff muddled it, and I think that the movies did a very, very good job of confusing people as to what the actual stakes of that battle were. And I think that like this is something that we have to keep in mind in like all stories that we watch too, right? It's like the main character, we're following them through a journey, but that doesn't mean that like the stakes or the morals are centered upon the main character. And also doesn't mean that the main character has like perfect morals, because Harry Potter does a lot of messed up shit. He owns slaves. So, you know, like, let's talk about if Harry's redeemed. You know what I mean? So it's just like there, I think that like Harry Potter in particular is something that I've seen a lot of like people muddling fanon, canon, but also forgetting what the stakes actually were.
And we spent a lot of time on Draco, but don't worry, we have that same energy for that man, Severus Snape. We have more energy because he's not a child. He's a grown man who was like, I loved her. She didn't, first of all, she didn't love you back. So I feel like that doesn't help. It's not a good enough reason. Exactly. Like you can't just base it on like you had feelings for a girl, as we said earlier, and then you tortured children. You bullied and tortured children for several years before Harry Potter was even a question in the story, where it's like, oh, I have to protect him. But like, what about the 15 years before he showed up, where you were like just most students' worst fear? They all disliked you. People barely passed your class. And nothing helped with the further war efforts. Because again, this is about the larger war. So,
I think with Snape also in particular, I think people get upset because and confused. I mean, we're talking now more about also, you know, examples of where they get it wrong. But I think people also get confused in general when they like somebody's character or they like a character. They think that therefore they must be redeemed. Like I used to say, I don't say it now because people take it incorrectly, that Snape was one of my favorite characters because it's not that his story isn't compelling. Like it is absolutely compelling. His role in the bigger narrative and, you know, his relationship with Dumbledore, super fascinating, super interesting. But that doesn't mean it's a redemption arc. And by saying it's not a redemption arc, that doesn't take away all of that stuff. But it's just, he didn't do the work. He's not redeemed. J.K. Rowling did not do the work in so many ways and did not redeem this character. And that's that on that.
Yeah, I agree. He needed to get over it. It's been 15 something years and he's not, again, we talked, like Connie mentioned, like the personal part of it and it just being about one person. And it can't be. Like, he needs to hop out his feelings, hop in his bag. If he actually wants to, like, do something, then he has to do it because he feels that it's right and not just because, oh, like, the dead woman that I had a crush on that didn't want nothing to do with me is wrong. You know what I mean? Or wants me to do this or, like, in her memory. Like, that's nice. And, like, it could be a part of it, but it can't be the only thing because otherwise he would have still He would have been much kinder to Harry, would have been much kinder to all them kids, would have, like, we just would have seen a different character, honestly. Like, he would, not to say that he wouldn't be surly or like a curmudgeon, but he wouldn't be an a-hole, right? Like, he wouldn't just be like torturing children, threatening to kill Toad.
I think it's safe to say you cannot be redeemed if you torture children. I think that's just safe to say, like, in general. And
it's a pretty good rule.
So, and I think you can be,
which goes, wow, that was a good segue into where I was going next, which is like another huge set. I'll say a set of redemption arcs that aren't redemption arcs. Sorry, just they're not. I was like, I haven't had a chance to yell about Kylo Ren yet, but the torturing of children just made me think of his grandfather, because like everyone redeems Darth Vader, and like, I mean, sure, at that later point, he is not currently killing younglings, but at one point in his life, he walked into the Jedi Temple and slaughtered children, and also slaughtered all those. I don't remember the creature right off the top of my head right now, but the ones who killed his mom. He just like the women and the children.
Jawa, right?
Yeah. He killed all of them. So, but anyway, like fast forward the 40 whatever years later, or it's only 20 years later. Never mind. They're 18. I'm like, why is it? I was like, it should be 40 years later. Nope, it's a cool 23. But 23 years later, like, he's evil until literally until like maybe like 10 minutes into Luke being tortured by Palpatine. It's like at the beginning, it's just like, join me. Let's just do this together. And then Luke's being tortured. Right. He's like, but we could stop this if you join me. And then he's like, actually, I don't like seeing you in pain. I'm going to yeet the Emperor into this like little hole here. Like, that's not an actual redemption arc. Like, suddenly he appears with Yoda and Obi-Wan as a ghost, and it's like, I'm good in the afterlife where it's not useful. Sir, no. And so he's passed that terrible trait on to his grandson, because Kylo Ren exhibits the same things. Like, he spends however long after he's like escaped the Jedi that he hated, he hated whatever was going on. He had all these dark thoughts. Whoever, Snoke or Palpatine, I don't know. It's unclear because screw that last movie. But like, someone's poisoning his mind. So it's like, that's an outside influence, like pushing him in the wrong direction. But with the amount of time that he spends there, it still becomes an internal thing that he accepts. Like, I want to be like my grandfather. I want to, blow up planets. And then I push the button to blow up these planets. And I like go into villages and I shoot people and I kidnap people. And I'm looking for my uncle so that I can murder him, I think. So like the fact that at the end of this very problematic movie, which makes no sense in so many different ways, the answer is like, in the last two movies, he had this weird, like, mental sexual tension with Rey, and it's like, oh my goodness, we just have a connection, and like, maybe she should join me. And then she says no, and she's like, join me, and he says no, and then she asks again, you could just join me, and again he says no. So there are two times when he is offered a chance to become a better person, to at least start the journey, More than two,
because
but those two
he had a moment, and then he killed his dad.
Killed his dad.
So
he killed his father.
Was a
You're
moment where he could
right.
have chosen not to.
You're absolutely
that whole
right, because
first
that
thing
is the main reason.
Talking about, I feel the light in me, and I don't know.
That's
what to
the
do
main
about
reason
it.
I don't mess with him. You do not come back.
The second Han Solo said, I think he could still come back from that, but the second he said, join me, and then he said, nah, like, that was a moment. And then when after Rey said, join me, and he said, nah, then it's a wrap.
And
like,
then
he made a decision.
His mother had to force energy his way into redemption. That was Leia.
That was all Leia. And so it's like, you're giving these two opportunities in one movie, then the next movie. Like, that's twice in a row.
Too.
Explicitly
like
given a
they're
choice.
Not small moments. They're very explicit.
Like, the camera's panning in on your hand, like stabbing your father and throwing him off a cliff. Like, come on. And then the girl that you kind of have a connection with. Like, I could see them doing it. Like, if Han Solo's not the one, it's because of the pretty girl who's just like, oh, she's so different and like she's special. I like Rey, but like this is basically what it is. Like, she's special and like he's drawn to her and she's so powerful and oh my goodness. And she also is not the answer for him to say for him to decide to come to a new place. And then in the last movie, it's just like, oh, his mother dies and like infuses him with the Force and somehow makes his father show up, I guess, you know, because Harrison Ford. So, you know, like those two things, then now it's like, oh, sure, I'm gonna like take off my like cloak and like wear a Henley and like run into the thing and try to save and help save Rey. And then
not wear a Henley. Wait, okay,
he's wearing
it's
the Henley. It's like nothing. Like the wardrobe department was just like, well, it's almost over. Like seriously, we'll try to show you a screenshot. But like he goes in there and they like fight and they fight together and then he like sacrifices himself for her. But there's still a war going on. Like the war is happening above them and he's doing nothing to help that. Not a single thing. It's all about helping Rey. It is all focused on this one character, this one girl. He could still care less about the people that are dying above him in the planes and in the thingies. So
Tosin
like
Cole is up there.
Tosin Cole is up there. You're right. Sorry, I just realized that we didn't talk about Finn.
Yeah.
You're right.
Which is a great redemption.
Which is egregious that we just did not talk about Finn.
I think part of it is that it would have been a good redemption arc, but they didn't commit as the writers. I think the pieces are all there, but they didn't actually
for Finn, you're saying?
Go there. Yeah, for Finn. They didn't actually
but I
go
feel like he
the
is,
places
though,
where
at least I'm just saying within
sure.
The Force Awakens. Like not even like the ones after, but just even that.
I think that's part of the thing for me though, is that like tacking on the other two parts of it, it weakens the like redemption arc that does exist. I don't think it does
because I don't necessarily think it does, at least not for me, just because like I think it goes from him being like, I just wanna get out of here. You know what I mean? Like from being like, I don't want to be a stormtrooper. That doesn't mean I want to fight. And then him going on the arc of being like, he's of always trying to run away. So then being like, nah, I'm actually going to embrace it. I feel like that's a full arc. Yeah. And the other two I don't think that they contribute or detract from that.
Mm-hmm.
So we're like coming up on time, but I just want to say, and I'm not going to elaborate, and my handle on Twitter is right here, Loki Lothuson. He got redeemed. Thank you.
All right. Wow, that is a thing to leave out in the open.
Right.
Yeah. But we don't have time. So why do you think that redemption arcs are more... No, never mind. When and how is this confused discourse surrounding redemption arcs harmful? And how is it harmful?
I mean, this goes to the question that you just dropped. It's harmful because a lot of redemption arcs center around men and male egos. And the idea of no matter what a man does, they have the capacity to be redeemed. And also that we should just accept the bare minimum and then give them all of the platitudes and cookies and things like that.
Except that they were flawed human beings. Oh my goodness.
And like women do not get the same, chances or stories and the same redemption. And like most all female redemption arcs that I can think of are like full realized arcs because they have to be for them to get any sorts of empathy or acceptance. I think also the problem is that, we look to stories a lot to model behavior. And we see a lot of people, a lot of morals tied into like the things that people grow up watching. They become really tied to like your morals and what you believe is right or wrong. And if the redemption arc is not done well, then it makes a lot of people think that they can skip the work. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing a lot of that in like our current society right now, where you buy an anti-racist book and you think that that's it and you've been redeemed, and that is not it. That's like the start of a
talking
journey.
About George Bush being
good.
Being good. Like,
yeah.
Like what?
Because
it has not been that long for y'all to just suddenly have
right.
selective memory. Like, I just don't.
Right.
I don't understand.
Or the way that people try to tell stories about redemption in real life. I think it is modeled off of the way that we poorly tell redemption stories in fiction. I think the most recent example that I can think of is like that, 17-year-old who shot 2 people at a protest, and the way that, 45 juniors just like, yeah, well, we all did terrible things at 17, but
I never shot a human.
In comparison, you didn't? Oh my gosh. In comparison, like there are numerous, in our example, Black people who have been shot and killed for infinite less. And so I think, like, obviously that's a super real world example, but the way that we tell these stories in fiction affects how people view those kinds of stories in real life. Mm-hmm. And they affect how, people on the receiving end of those fears of being the victim are feel in real life. Like we can only think of one Black character and we almost didn't think of him, like that. We're 4 Black women whose job it is to talk about critical fandom and focusing on Black characters. And it took us 50 minutes into a panel on this topic to remember that Finn is a good example of that. And I think that is harmful to us as people who are trying to enjoy critical content. I think it's harmful to people of other races who need to be able to identify and recognize those shared traits of humanity and the ability to redeem a Black person, because maybe there'd be fewer people who shoot Black people just on sight because they think that, they're bad. I don't think that necessarily will fix the problem. Obviously not. There are numerous other reasons why those things happen, but everything is a piece of everything. And I think fiction is just as important as in helping shape where we send our children and where we send the future and how they treat other people.
And it's not a redemption if the whole point is to serve yourself.
Mm-hmm.
John Boehner, for example, his stance on marijuana is not a redemption. He still had a hand in putting a whole generation of people in prison about marijuana, and then he realized, oh, there's a bag there for me, so I changed my stance. That is not a redemption. It doesn't change his morals. It just makes him a grifter.
Yes.
It's got real, but that's
where we are now.
That's where we are.
Very much so.
So last question, just quickly. Often in fandom, we see these incomplete redemption arcs, like we talked about Draco. We debated whether Finn is complete or a regressed redemption arc. But people like to fix these things in fanon works. So what do you think? How do you think we can do this more responsibly, and how should fan creators approach this? What are some things they should keep in mind when they're trying to fix these redemption arcs to engage with it more critically?
I mean, I think for me, it's mostly just acknowledging that that's not what happened in canon. Like, I think that you can talk about, like, this is how I think. Like, I think there are some people who've been like, this is how I think Kylo Ren could have been redeemed, and have taken the time to, like, plot out what that would look like. And then it's like, yep, that is a redemption arc, and I might mess with him a little bit more if that were the case, right? But it's also, it's both, like, fixing it, but then also, like, continuing to critique the ways that, like, the canon failed. Because sometimes it can be difficult to not conflate the two, but you want to be really careful to not do that.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if pushing back is the right word, but like if you think that Kylo Ren had a good redemption arc and I don't, and I have XYZ reasons why, I feel like you just have to acknowledge that, like, you aren't necessarily the rightest person in the scenario. And I think that happens with Snape. I think it happens with Draco. There are a lot of characters where it's like, you can like a bad guy. That's fine. I'm not saying you can't like the bad guy, but I think to, like, soften a lot of these characters that are megalomaniacs and harmful to, like if I lived in some of these worlds, those characters would not let me live, like, and I think that's it's something I can't help think about because, again, the real world examples we've come up with before. And so it's like, if I feel like this character is going to be harmful to me if I lived in this fictional world, and you're like, but it's cute, like, look how soft he is. I'm like, but he murdered like several planets worth of people. Like, I just feel like you have to own that they killed several planets worth of people, and understand that I might not like that he did that. Like, if someone, I like Vegeta's character, I read lots of Vegeta Bulma fan fiction, but like, if someone's like, Vegeta's not redeemed and like he's still a terrible person, I'm like, actually, I could see it. Again, I'm an Enneagram 9, so I'm probably going to agree with anybody who's like, let's come to a compromise. But like, I'm not going to be like, oh, he's the best and he's so soft, but he killed thousands of planets of people. Like, he's a murderer. He's definitely a murderer. Yeah. And when I read those fanfic, I know that, and I acknowledge that. And like, if I'm going to talk to somebody else about it, I'm going to acknowledge that this is part of who he was, and like, that it's bad. It's really bad. And so it's like, I don't fault you for not wanting to agree with me on that. And so I think that that's just like the part of the forward movement. Just like, accept that your bad guy is a bad guy.
Right.
Yeah, I think that is, I know that we're out of time, but I think that that's like the biggest thing for me is like, not every character, whether you like them or not, needs to be redeemed. And a lot of times doing that work to
accept them as bad guys.
Yeah, you can, when you redeem an unredeemable character, you're doing a lot of harm. I think a lot of the Snape, like just the culture of Snape is much more harmful than what was just on the page. And I think that the vast majority of like this like group rethink, group hallucination of who they want Snape to be is very damaging.
Because then it's like, did we read the same text? Like,
it's not even that. It's like I don't even think it's that. I think that like, even if he had done the work, a lot of his harm is harmful, and like. Mm-hmm. It's to my opinion, it's up to the people who could say he's redeemed. He killed, so we, yeah.
Lily can't say anything.
Lily
can't say.
Dumbledore doesn't count.
Yes.
Well, thank you all for joining us. I'm sure you're all like at the edge of your seats, like, you didn't talk about this person or that person. Like, we didn't even talk about Regina from Once Upon a Time, which I was excited to talk about. So, you can
talk
find
about
us
the Buffyverse. Like, there are so many good examples in the Buffyverse.
So so find us. Our ads are on the screen, but also you can find us all collectively at blackgirlscreate.org. We have a blog. We have our Hogwarts BSU project, where we imagine ourselves, not us specifically, but Black people as characters within the Harry Potter universe. You can also find us on Twitter as an organization at Black Girls Create. That's BLK Girls Create. And I think that's it. Thank you guys so much for joining. And
thank you for letting us ramble about, our favorite redemption arcs.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll see you next year in Seattle.
Actually see you though.
Actually, in person.
Fingers crossed.
Maybe the Rona can redeem itself.
No.
Stay tuned. Find out.
Irredeemable.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.